letting a bottle stand up and letting it lying down has a very different impact on what the culture does and in what time the culture does it.
Exactly.
In your personal opinion, it's not only about the bigger surface if you lie the bottle down, but it's also about the hydrostatic pressure, which makes it easier. If it's down, makes it harder. If it's standing up, for the culture to fully work through whatever food they find in the beer, right?
Right, that's true. Right, which is obviously nothing new, right? I mean, you can go to bigger breweries, which were, let's say, historically working with, like, let's say, more flat vessels for the fermentation, which then switched to cylindrical fermenters, which are probably more like built in height than diameter, meaning if you would basically put the same wort into these two different vessels, same yeast strain, I wouldn't be surprised if the two beers actually turn out completely different, because again, I think it's not only about the hydrostatic pressure that actually has an impact on the yeast itself, meaning in a, like, let's say, rather high to wide fermenter, you have more pressure on the yeast, which then probably performs differently compared to a wide versus not so high, flat.
Slower, I guess, with a different sensoric result.
Yes.
More structure rate, making it a slower process.
Right.
pH being another very important factor, of course.
Yeah, but that's more about like how actually, let's say, bottle condition actually, like how the performances of, let's say, bottle conditioning, as we do for all our brands. So we indeed experience a lot of variety if we, for instance, have non-barrel aged project, barrel aged project, sour project, non-sour project. It highly depends on, like, the, let's say, the performance and how these kind of beers actually develop, right? Be it in smaller bottles, bigger bottles, if you lay them on a flat side versus you stack them up, and so on and so forth. So it apparently seems to have a bigger impact than we initially thought, which is, again, makes it really interesting to see how can actually further influence the profiles, for instance, or the maybe even the shelf life. I don't know. Maybe there are even additional steps you can think of in addition to that.
In the end, you would not say that there is a good way, a right way and a wrong way, but rather that it's a very different sensoric result. And with every beer style and every yeast culture, you would need to actually experiment again over time, which I think is a very one of the biggest qualities of your brewery, is that you're investing not only the experimentation time but the aging time for certain styles to be really true to style, but then again, and analyzing that to improve your brewing technique for the next stage.
For instance, I mean, if we can, we try to keep, let's say, to style if you have to. Otherwise, in our perspective, it's mainly sensory driven. If the basically the beer tells us when it's ready, right? And the only thing that we don't really know from the start is how the beer further develops in the, let's say, package, be it bottles or kegs, for instance. But again, what we do is we try to learn from previous experiments / releases, how they developed over the years. We try them, let's say we actually assess them via sensory analysis, also like some physical chemistry, whatever we can, be it pH or gravity measurements, to actually see how these products further develop, if at all, and if they develop, how do they develop, to also get a better understanding, for instance, how should you actually design the newer products in terms of sensory profile, that we get closer to the profile that we initially thought of. Be it if we see, for instance, let's say an easy example, if we say the sugar level, or let's say the perceived sweetness actually decreases with maturation time, you can say, well, to actually have the residual sweetness that you want at point X, you can actually try to overshoot it in a blending to actually be on spot with the sweetness, let's say 3 months after packaging, for instance. Or that's just an easy example, for example.
Carbonisation wise, you have two very different techniques that you're using if it comes to bottles compared to kegs.
Right.
Because with kegs you're actually using
forced
a
carbs.
standardized pressure, right?
Right, forced carbing. Yeah.
And with bottles,
Everything is like natural bottle conditioning. Everything.
are you adding a culture when you're bottling?
Yes, we do. Well, it's not our house culture, simply because we know our house culture is rather slow in terms of fermentation performance.
Needing that higher temperature compared to other...
It's not only that, it's simply
Okay.
the time it needs to actually, let's say, eat through the sugars that are left, right? So that's mainly that's the main reason why we choose to not work with our, let's say, native wild cultures, because it's still a wild culture. We know it also has its days. It also has its good and bad days. So to actually not to be reliant on a good or bad day, we just go with let's say US 05 material, for instance, where we know we have the product ready at day X and it has to go out because
And carbonization in the bottle as well.
right at the expected carbonation level, because again we also have some variety there. For certain style we go low
Stylized, right.
carbonations, which we say, for instance, the pale ale that is on tap today as well, it's also on the lower side,
Yes.
because we say it also gives you a different sensory perspective.
Sure.
It actually makes the beer thicker, so you can actually also hide certain, let's say, lacks of sweetness with a lower carbonation as well. For instance, as an easy example.